When a friend's kid accidentally pushed his custom Les Paul on the floor and snapped its headstock, I took a look at it and started thinking, do we really need that much of an angle on a headstock? Is that angle really necessary, and how much of it? So stay with me, you may be surprised. Hi, I'm Yoav and this is the Electric Luthier. Today we're going to dive into headstock angles and string break angles and see how much we know about them and what we do take for granted. Now we all know that guitars need to have a break angle for the strings in order to get a clean sound. But how much is too much and how much do we really need? I looked back as far as the luth. The luth is the instrument after which Luthier is named. The luth has almost a 90-degree angle to its headstock. Now that's obviously a bit much, but why do we have this great angle? Well, there are three reasons for that. One, tradition. Electric guitars came from classic, acoustic, and Spanish guitars, which all have an angled headstock. The second is aesthetic, which also has to do with tradition, but I can't really judge aesthetics because, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And whether I find it aesthetically pleasing may not fit somebody else's aesthetics. The third one is practicality. And that brings me back to my friend's broken Les Paul. Now, sadly, Les Pauls are notorious for having broken headstocks. And why is that? Because of the way they're built. Traditionally, the headstock of a Les Paul is one piece with a neck, and therefore the angled part has a very thin part that is prone to breakage. Add to that the mere shape that always has the tip of the headstock being the first to hit the ground, and you have a recipe for disaster. So I understand that this shape is problematic and may be prone to breakage. Another characteristic of the steep angle is the high pressure of the strings on the nut. Now, this high static pressure is often said to improve tone, tunability, and sustain. On the other hand, the increased static pressure also adds to more wear and tear on both the nut and the strings. Every time you strum a guitar, the string vibrates and also moves back and forth on the nut. That creates friction, and the higher the static pressure, the more friction you'll get. It's common to put some lubrication or use the nut material itself as something that will enable that motion of the string. When you put higher pressure, you limit that or put more strain on it. Is it a price worth paying? I'm not sure. But if you do think that it gives you better tone and stability, you might say, yes, it is a good price to pay, and I will pay it. I will change strings more often if so necessary, and I'll change the nut every so often. Of course, that depends on how much you play the guitar. Going back to the vulnerability of the angle, that can also be fixed with what's called a scarf joint. And if you're building your headstock with an angle and with a scarf joint, you will have a stronger headstock, and chances of it breaking at that point will be much lower. On the other side of the spectrum, you have the flat headstocks of Fenders and such. These use the minimum angle needed to still have good sound and avoid the string slipping from the nut. The evidence for that is that if you look at a typical Fender headstock, you can see that the angle for the low E is much steeper than the high E and the B string. The high E and the B string, in fact, are so low in angle that you often need string trees or other types of retainers to lower the string and improve the angle. Now, a lot of people find those aesthetically unpleasing, but that's not the issue here. What we can say is that a neck with a flat headstock is inherently much stronger than any angled one. Other concerns which may not affect you as a private or hobbyist builder are production concerns. Flat headstocks require a lot less material. Leo Fender introduced the efficiency to make those flat headstocks, which are also more economical because you use much less material. The simplicity of the construction is also a concern when it comes to mass production. Now, is there an ideal angle? Obviously, the answer to that would be no. You can look at guitars from Fender, which sound awesome, and the most outrageously angled Gibsons, which also sound great. Of course, this is subjective, but you cannot deny that there's a whole range of guitars with different angles who all sound great. It depends who plays them more than the actual guitar. Now, as far as playing it, it's a personal preference, and we can see that most guitarists decide upon which guitar they use according to very, very subjective decisions and not just this or that angle. So, in conclusion, you can see that there's a whole range of angles which all work. Ultimately, the decision which ones you want to use as a builder or as a player is totally subjective. And it's usually not just the practicality that will make the decision. However, there are pros and cons, and there are ways to get around them. For instance, if you use a flat headstock, you're probably going to make up for the shallow angle with either trees or a 6-string retainer like Ibanez use. And on the other hand, if you're going to use an extreme angle, you're going to make up for it with something like a scarf joint to make it stronger and as beautiful as you want it to be. I'm hoping this video will help you make a more informed decision to which type of headstock you want to build on your next guitar. If you do find it helpful, please like and subscribe. And you can also come and visit my website, The Electric Luthier, with a lot more information on such subjects for building guitars. And until next time, go on, build a guitar!